A father in Australia faces murder charges after police say he dropped his 4-year-old daughter off the side of a highway bridge, a tall one. Court officials say 36-year-old Darcey Freeman dropped the girl from the West Gate.
It was the first day of school for 4-year-old Darcey Freeman, and she was really excited about it. Sadly, she never made it to school, and her life was abruptly cut short by the one person whose duty it was to protect her: her father, Arthur Freeman. Arthur was taking Darcey and her 2 brothers to school when he suddenly made a decision that would destroy his family forever. The last words Darcey's mother heard from Arthur before he murdered their daughter were, "Say goodbye to your children." Why would a father kill his own daughter? And why did he do it in the presence of his other children? On the morning of January 29, 2009, Arthur Freeman was doing his fatherly duty by taking his children to school. Or so it seemed. But he had something sinister planned, and no one could have predicted it. Freeman got into his white Toyota Land Cruiser and took off from his parents' home in Aireys Inlet. He was headed to Melbourne, where his children's school was. Their mother was waiting to meet them just outside the school gate. At about 9:15 a.m., Freeman pulled his car over onto the emergency stopping lane on the West Gate Bridge, after which he turned on his hazard lights. He got out of the car, pulled his daughter Darcey out of the back seat, took her to the railing of the bridge, and without looking back, he lifted her and dropped her 58 meters to her death. Surprisingly, Freeman didn't seem to mind that the bridge was full of motorists who had witnessed the evil he had just done. He also didn't care about the fact that his 2 boys had watched him throw their sister off the bridge from the back seat window. He just turned around calmly, walked back into his car like nothing happened. Several motorists who had watched the incident thought that Freeman was taking his daughter to the rail because she wanted to throw up or something. They had no idea that the girl was about to die at the hands of her father. Once they realized what had happened, they immediately began calling the authorities to save Darcey. Once Freeman got back in the car, his son Ben began asking him to go back for his sister. Ben's pleas fell on deaf ears. Ben continued to beg his father to save his sister. He even reminded him that Darcey didn't know how to swim. But Freeman was too far gone. After receiving calls from concerned witnesses, the police immediately rushed to the scene and began searching for Darcey in the water underneath the bridge. As they searched the area, they soon noticed a childlike figure floating. They quickly lifted little Darcey into the boat, but it was too late. She didn't have a pulse. Paramedics began trying to revive the girl before she was airlifted to the Royal Children's Hospital, where doctors continued trying to save her. A little over an hour later, Freeman parked his car in front of the Commonwealth Law Courts in Melbourne. He walked over to the security guard and tried to hand over his son to the guard. The guard explained to Freeman that he could not take the child when he was asked if everything was okay. Freeman burst into uncontrollable tears. CCTV footage showed Freeman crying and shaking in a manner that was considered to be catatonic. His son held his hands and hugged him, trying to comfort him, but Freeman wouldn't stop crying. He was crying like he had just realized what he had done to his daughter and family about an hour back. The court officials tried speaking to the distressed father, but he seemed to have spaced out. He was standing, looking out a window, and remained unresponsive to both staff and his children, who were asking him what was wrong. A court psychologist present stated that Freeman appeared to be in a frozen state, and he had a look of anguish on his face. The footage later showed police taking Freeman out of the court. When one policeman asked him what happened, Freeman responded by saying, "Take me away." Due to the number of people that witnessed the incident, the case soon became a high-profile one. Freeman was immediately taken into custody and charged with murder. Arthur Freeman had changed the entire course of his life in less than an hour. But what could have led him to this point? The answer to that question began in 1998, when Freeman met Peta Barnes, who was a human resource rep at the time. The lovebirds moved in together and got married in December 1999. They then moved to London, where Arthur had gotten a well-paying IT job. The couple had their first child, Benjamin Eric, in 2002. Darcey Iris, who was born in 2004, was their second child, and their third child, Jonathan Jackson, was born in 2006. The family moved back to Australia after the birth of their third child. During this period, Arthur was finding it hard to secure a job, which led to him having regular mood swings. Arthur's mood swings soon began to cause a strain on his marriage. Slowly, the couple began to have more and more issues. In 2007, police reportedly visited the couple's home due to an altercation between them. However, the cause of the altercation remained unknown. Soon, Peta began to express fear for her children's welfare, and it had become apparent that the marriage was heading to its end. The couple's divorce was finalized in late 2008. Following the divorce, Peta and Arthur were sharing custody for their children, with each parent having the children for 3 days a week. This arrangement worked well until June 2008, when Arthur announced that he was going back to England to secure his permanent residency. As a result, Peta started to make moves in order to change the custody arrangement through the court. Arthur was not happy with this new development, so he returned to Australia in December 2008 to seek legal advice. A custody hearing was set for the 27th and 28th of Jan 2009. However, before the hearing, the family needed to be interviewed by a psychologist who would determine the best option for the children. In the end, the psychologist considered Arthur to have a warm and healthy relationship with his children, but he had a chronic personality and interpersonal problems. As a result of this, the psychologist decided that it was better for the children to live with their mother and visit their father on alternate weekends. On the 28th of January 2009, the hearing was concluded and the court granted Peta Barnes more time with the children and less with Arthur. As one would imagine, Arthur was enraged by the court's ruling. After the proceedings, Arthur went back to his parents' house with the children. He was disappointed by the court's decision and told his parents that he constantly felt like he had to justify his right to be a parent. He also stated that he felt like the psychologist had set him up. Later that night, Peta called Arthur to check on the children, but Arthur told them that he would get the children to call her in the morning on their way to school. The next morning, which was the 29th of January, Arthur's father, Peter, noticed that his son was still visibly upset about the court's ruling. Peter asked Arthur if he would like for him to accompany him and the children on the 90-minute drive to Melbourne, but Arthur refused the offer. The plan was simple. Arthur would take his children to school where their mother was waiting at the gate to give Darcey her school uniform. Shortly before he committed the heinous crime, Peta had called Arthur because she was concerned that Darcey, who was going to school for the first time, would get there late. The last thing he said to Peta was, "Say goodbye to your children," before he hung up the phone and proceeded to throw Darcey over the bridge. Unfortunately, after hours of trying to revive the little girl, Darcey was pronounced dead at 1:35 p.m. that day. After his arrest, the police allowed only members of Arthur's immediate family to see him. Peter Freeman stated that his son was in some sort of psychotic state that he had never witnessed before. Peter noted that Arthur was on the ground lying in a fetal position and was making no form of communication with him. Peter said that since Arthur's marriage with Peta broke apart in 2007, Arthur had gone through phases of distress, paranoia, and depression. He knew all that his son had gone through. However, he admitted that he did not think to tell him to seek help or see a therapist. During trial, a psychiatrist on the defense team testified that Freeman was suffering from a major depressive disorder when he murdered his daughter. The psychiatrist believed that Freeman was out of touch with reality, a state he considered to be similar to sleepwalking or hypnosis. According to the psychiatrist, Freeman had no memory of the incident on the bridge and did not believe that he could have done such a terrible thing. It was also said that Freeman believed that people had told him about what he had done, and he had accepted it. In a shocking twist, the defense psychiatrist was the only one out of the 6 psychiatrists that evaluated Freeman after the incident who came to a conclusion that Freeman was mentally ill at the time of the incident. The prosecution's psychiatrist stated that there was no evidence to prove that Freeman was mentally impaired to a point where he could not discern that his actions were wrong. They in fact believed that Freeman murdered his daughter for spousal revenge. One psychiatrist pointed out the fact that Freeman had made several phone calls during the drive from his parents' house to Melbourne. He had also made threats to his wife a few minutes before the incident. These actions proved that Freeman was in fact aware of what was happening around him. The defense's claim that Freeman was mentally ill was proven wrong by the revelation of the custody battle that had ended just the day before he murdered Darcey.
But first tonight, justice for a remorseless killer. Arthur Freeman has been sentenced to life in prison for throwing his daughter Darcey off the Westgate Bridge. The judge told the packed courtroom the horrific act was an attack not only on his daughter and the family, but the whole community. 10's Alicia McMillan was in court for the sentence and joins us live now. Alicia, what was Arthur Freeman's reaction to the sentence?
On 28 March 2011, Arthur Freeman was found guilty of murdering his daughter and was subsequently sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 32 years. In May 2011, Freeman made an attempt to appeal his sentence, but his appeal was denied. Although her life was short, Darcey Freeman is remembered by her family members as a strong-willed girl who had a close relationship with her brothers.